Welcome to Bebop Scales. I'm Scott Black, and I'm going to talk about how to understand, practice, and ultimately use bebop scales. We're starting by talking about using dominant 7 bebop scales and major 7 bebop scales, which are in both cases are just half steps added to major scales. So the first thing that we need to understand to add half steps to the major scales is the key signature, what I call the key signature of the chord, what major scale to use on the chord. And to do this, we must understand the 2-5-1 relationship because we figure out the key of the chord and the major scale to use based on the 2-5-1 relationship. So the 2-5-1 represents scale degrees of a major 7th chord. So the major 7th chord is 1, and the first note of that scale we call 1. The second note of that scale we call 2. The chord built on that will be the 2 chord. The third note is 3, fourth note is 4, fifth note is 5. The chord built on the fifth note of the fifth note of a major scale is the 5 chord. So over here, you can see examples of a 2-5-1. One of my favorite things to explain how things work in terms of scale construction and making bass lines and understanding chord progressions is interval structure. And 2-5-1s are based on chords moving in ascending fourths. So, for example, this is D minor 7, which is a 2 chord. They go up a fourth to G7, and that goes up a fourth to C major 7. And so this is an example of a 2-5-1, and there, in this case, like all 2-5-1s, there's one major scale that's used for all 3 chords, but there's 3 chords, and as we will discover, there's 2 bebop scales. There's a bebop scale that the D minor and G7 share, which is the G7 bebop scale, and there's a major 7 bebop scale for the major chord. Major chords and the keys of major chord is kind of like a Grant's Tomb question. E flat major chord uses an E flat major scale. D major chord uses a D major scale. So figuring out what major scale we use is what we're trying to make sure that we understand. It's important to realize that these 2-5-1s are unique relationships. In this case down here where we see C minor, F7, B flat, that's a 2-5-1, and if any of those 3 chords are F7 or C minor or B flat, the corresponding chords are always going to be exactly like it's indicated there. F7 is not going to be the 5 of D or E or some other chord at some point in time. They're fixed relationships, just like an F major scale is 1 flat and a D major scale has 2 sharps. There's 12 major scales, there's 12 2-5-1s. So understanding this relationship and figuring out the key based on figuring out what the 1 chord is in a 2-5-1, and then that's your key. So you should practice things like, oh, it's a 2-5-1 in the key of A. So by saying that in the key of A is the 1 chord. The second note of the A major scale is B. The fifth note of the A major scale is E. So the 2-5-1 is B minor 7, E7, A major 7. And I could give myself a dominant chord like C sharp 7. Okay, so C sharp 7 is the 5th note of an F sharp major scale. So F sharp is 1, and the second note of the F sharp major scale is G sharp. And so that's what it's always going to be. C sharp 5 chord is always going to have G sharp as a 2 and F sharp as a 1, and you are going to base the scale that you add half steps to off that key signature of the 1 chord. So it's very important to think about that, practice that, and then we will go into detail in lesson 2 about how to form the dominant and the major bebop scales and why they are formed the way they are and how to start practicing them, understand them further. So I look forward to seeing you in lesson 2. Thank you so much for being here, and see you again.